Gluten and lactose allergies and intolerances affect a large portion of the population. These often have similar symptoms that are both uncomfortable and unpleasant. So what causes these allergies and intolerances, and what can we do about them? We've invited lifestyle chef Azelle Hoffman and nutritional therapist Nikki Robertson to discuss what the reason behind gluten and lactose allergies and intolerances are, as well as dietary changes that could be made to manage them. Welcome, ladies. It's lovely to have you both with us.
Thank you.
So tell us, what is the difference essentially between an intolerance and an allergy when it comes to food? Nikki, let's go there.
So an allergy is a life-threatening condition. If you have an allergy to a food, you'll most likely stop breathing, your mouth or throat will swell up, and you will need to get to an emergency medical facility really quickly. So that is a proper allergy, as opposed to an intolerance, which tends to creep up on a person gradually. And most people don't realize they have intolerances for ages until it becomes a systemic problem. So what I mean by that is they will have what is called IBS, their tummies will feel uncomfortable, they will have a runny nose, lots of sinus problems, most likely an eczema, something break out on the skin. So it's not as severe, but it is something that the body is trying to fight, and it fights the immune system. And
is that just because the body sees whatever you've eaten as a toxin or something that's putting it at risk?
Yes and no. So there's a couple of reasons why we have an intolerance to something. It could be under stress. So when you're under stress, your body creates inflammation, and your immune system will target that food and associate it with the stress and create an inflammatory response. That is one thing. The other very common problem is what we call leaky gut. So there is a permeability in the intestine, and whatever you're eating goes through the intestine up into the immune system, and the immune system releases T cells or immune system cells and also codes that food as an intolerance. That can become an allergy over time as well. So then, if you're getting those symptoms, it can actually become quite a dangerous food allergy if you don't eliminate that food completely.
So the intolerance, you could really say, is a symptom of another problem that you need to deal with. Azelle, you've suffered from some of these intolerances. How's that impacted your life?
So I was born with congenital hip dysplasia, and my struggle throughout life was always about, arthritis, osteoporosis, what foods makes it worse, what makes it better. So yes, in the beginning, I always know what red flag. I'm colorblind. I have no idea what my body is talking about. But you know what? Later on, you do realize your body you must start listening to it. It is trying
to ignore
to tell you something. And it's only when you start really cutting all of these things out of your diet that you actually realize, oh, hold on, when I actually eat something, it does have this effect on my body.
Let's talk specifically about lactose and gluten food intolerances. They seem to be ones that are very common. Almost sometimes you feel people pick up on a buzzword like, oh, I'm gluten intolerant. But what actually are they, and what is causing these particular ones, and why are they so prevalent?
So human beings have been eating gluten or wheat for hundreds, maybe thousands of years with very little effect. Human beings have been drinking cow's milk for thousands of years with very little ill effect, but maybe not to the extent that we're eating them or the volume that we're eating these foods today, firstly. Secondly is the way these foods are manufactured. So if a cow is fed all sorts of garbage, not grass, a cow is meant to eat exclusively grass, and they're given something else that will become part of that milk product, which we are then consuming. So it's not always
the actual
lactose, which is a specific sensitivity, or the actual wheat, which is a celiac sensitivity. So to have celiac disease means you have an autoimmune condition, which means that your immune system is confused. It's attacking itself. And not everybody who has a bad reaction to a bread product has celiacs. So not everybody's gluten sensitive. We might be sensitive to the other preservatives and humectants and antifungals and all sorts of things that go into making bread. The best way to know is to cut it out completely and then make your own bread and see what happens.
Because then you know exactly what's going into it.
And then so bread should be bird food the second day. It should be hard as a rusk. If your bread bounces across the table a week later, that's not bread.
It's not quite right for you.
There's something else in there, and that is usually what we become sensitized to, because we don't just eat one piece. Most people eat half a loaf at a time, because there's no satiety, there's no cutoff. We don't sense when we've had enough. There's fresh
One of the chefs
air
that I was speaking to at
in
one
it.
point, she said it's so indicative when you make French toast or something and you put egg,
Yes.
bread in egg, and it just turns into nothing. I mean, it's
Disintegrates.
quite scary. Yeah.
So yes, it's not always the food's fault. It's how food has been manufactured. So
Yes.
the only way to know if you have a sensitivity is to cut it out. That's the only way. And then you
Right.
put it back in controlled amounts, but very clean versions
can
of it.
identify it.
You can, yes. So if you cut out everything and put one thing back at a time, you know what's causing the problem.
Right. Isabel, you've got a specifically intolerance to dairy, and I know that you drink almond milk and things like that. How did
Yes.
you discover that it was dairy that was the intolerance that you had?
Well, dairy to me is one of the culprits that, causes inflammation. So I'm 100% self-taught in the sense of over the years, I know because my body told me,
Yes.
So I would try something. How do I, react on this, and then I'll cut that out. So as soon as I cut out dairy completely, I saw a vast difference in that. So
Right.
almond milks, yes, there's a lot of them on the market, but again, it's like Nikki says, there's a lot of products on the market and you think it's all bad. If you're trying to cut out, dairy because of the inflammation, but you replace it with an almond milk full of sunflower oil and all kinds of corn
Yeah.
starches and
Lots
stuff
of
like that,
sugars and-
it sort of defeats the whole purpose. So I always say to people, start with the right ingredients, and as soon as you can control that, then you're already one, step in the right direction to where you were yesterday.
I think a lot of people are fearful of eliminating something like dairy. And what am I going to have in my coffee? Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
That's the thing, is because they don't know.
They don't know, and there are actually so many things you can do. It's not the end of the world, but we have
Yeah.
this perception that I have to have my coffee. It has to have milk in it.
But you also, you've got to make the effort and do the exploration. What are some of the things that we can do in our daily lives at home to really alleviate the symptoms of intolerances, specifically to you as well? You deal with them. So how do you manage that?
I actually say to people, start reading labels, start actually picking up a product before you actually buy it and start reading what is in there, because there's a lot of hidden ingredients and a lot of products you're actually not even aware of.
Yes.
So if you're going to start cleaning up your pantry, cleaning up your fridge, make sure that you actually know what is in there, and if you're going to consume them, what's the effect going to be on your body.
Right.
That's always the best place to start, because then you sort of educate yourself. And I mean, there is this platform called Google nowadays. So, if in doubt, just Google.
Yeah,
but if
yeah.
you can't pronounce it, usually I say don't consume it. That's my golden rule.
Absolutely. And the foods that we assume are healthy, like prepackaged soups, everyone's like, prepackaged
So
soups
bad.
must be good for you. There's so many thickeners and preservatives in there that are full of gluten and full of all sorts of other allergens and things that are actually causing a problem. So unless you've got control over the ingredients and you can make it yourself and you can pronounce the name of the product, that's probably your best route check to solving the problem.
I think on so many levels, is it not right that whatever you're putting into your body, as you say, understand it and make the decision based on, no one's forcing you to do anything. So you've got to make the decisions based on what makes sense to you and also information that you have found and sourced.
Sure, and it takes creativity and a want to experiment. And many people are under the perception that they don't have time, but I don't have time to feel sick. So I'd rather make time to experiment in the kitchen and just find something that feels better.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, there are challenges in terms of finding replacements for, like, if you are gluten intolerant or dairy intolerant, there may be certain things that are obvious, but sometimes they can get a bit boring. So how do you go about deciding or finding out the info? Obviously Google, but what is your process to make sure that you're okay,
Make your list at home and walk into the store and buy the right stuff, because when you get home and you put it on your, in front of you on the table, whatever you're going to be making with it, it's going to be a good meal, because you know what ingredients you decided to put in there. A lot of people say to me, but I can't just leave. Remember we were just saying earlier, I can't have coffee without my milk. You don't need to have it without your milk. Just find the best, healthiest alternative for you out there.
And I think there are tons of options around. And I think as South Africans, we don't ask. We don't go to a restaurant and say, please don't add X, Y, Z. We feel bad about that, and we shouldn't, because that's what a restaurant's there to do, give us what we want to eat. There's so many options nowadays. If you just look for them, it's very, very simple. You've just got to look for it.
I think the choice is huge. Whenever you go out shopping, there's so many opportunities or options that you can pick for whatever you need to do. So
It can keep you busy for hours.
I've been
if
creative
you
as well.
really start comparing things, And when I start getting creative in the kitchen, to me it's always about, maybe, sweet potato is a vegetable, or, maybe something something like a quinoa that is gluten-free, you know, is ideal to add as a grain to a salad. But I sometimes cook the quinoa with a bit of cacao and raw honey, and it actually replaces a muesli. It's absolutely gorgeous because you can store it in the fridge for a couple of days, obviously not weeks on end. But I mean, you know, with fresh fruit and depending on what you prefer to have in the morning, I mean, it's a perfect meal.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant.
We've become so conditioned to pouring something out of a box where like 10 seconds more effort will give you this incredible experience.
Everything is a habit. We've learned these. We spoke about it earlier about that habit forming.
It's a habit.
So you mentioned quinoa as a gluten-free alternative. What are some of the other sort of replacements for gluten-heavy foods that are available?
Well, one of my favorites is definitely, I love buckwheat. I'm also quite a fan of chickpeas. What I do with buckwheat is I actually roast them in a pan. They go completely crunchy, and that's often my base for my homemade muesli as well. You know, you can sprinkle that on top of everything. It just finishes off that nice little breakfast meal, because think about it, why do you add granolas and stuff to your breakfast bowl? It's, you want that bit of crunch with the sweetness of maybe a fruit or whatever you decided to have that morning. Chickpeas, for me, I use it for any and everything from baking cakes straight through to, you know, crisp them up in the oven and have them as a healthy snack.
I've done that before, really
It
good
is
with some
so
paprika
tasty.
and things like that.
Yeah.
And Nikki, in terms of sort of oats and rye, they are accepted. Sometimes people say they are gluten-free, sometimes they're not gluten-free. What is the actual definitive answer?
So gluten is the glue. So think of glue as gluten that holds the product together. And rye does contain gluten. So when you go and get rye bread, it doesn't mean it's gluten-free. So if you're not suffering from celiac disease, and this is a proper sourdough rye bread made in a bakery, it's not full of preservatives, chances are it's not going to give you any trouble. But rye is not gluten-free. So if you have been diagnosed with celiac, it's not an option for you. Oats are naturally a gluten-free grain, but they are packaged very often in silos where there is wheat. So there's a lot of cross-contamination. So they will specify gluten-free oats as opposed to normal oats, just for liability's sake, so that people who do have a proper allergy or proper sensitivity don't go and consume that product. But for someone who just wants to stay away from the general product and make a better choice, oats are fantastic. They're very filling, they're very good for you, low GI, lots of fiber, they tick all the boxes. So
fantastic. And milk products that can be substituted for dairy?
That's a tricky one. I know you get lactose-free milk. I'm not entirely sure how good or bad that is for you. I've never really tried it. I personally stay away from lactose because it also affects me very badly. There is coconut milk, coconut yogurts, which apparently are very, very good. The nut milks are very expensive. You can make them yourself very easily. So there
and also
are
probably with
alternatives.
less of the extra bits and pieces that you don't necessarily want.
And getting used to no dairy is easy. There's this thing like, where am I going to get my calcium from? It's like, you actually don't get much calcium from dairy. That's a fact. You get 9 times more calcium out of sesame seeds than you do out of dairy.
I love sesame seeds, and raw cacao has got more calcium in than your cow's milk anyway. So a glass of almond milk with your raw cacao.
Precisely. Some tahini in a salad dressing, you're going to get way more calcium out of that than you will out of a glass of milk. So we've got to start realizing that milk isn't the be-all and end-all. There's a very big marketing campaign going around milk for like 100 years. Ever since there was TV advertising, milk was advertised as the calcium
source of life.
Exactly, and it's simply not. So we've got to start thinking differently if it's not working for you.
Absolutely.